a Supreme Court decision just dropped that changes everything about how police can use force during traffic stops. And if you carry a gun legally, this ruling could be the difference between justice and a cover-up if something goes wrong. 9 justices, 0 disagreement, and a complete game changer for your Fourth Amendment rights. Before we dive in, quick question: are you subscribed yet? No? Then you're missing out on updates that could literally save your life during a police encounter. What I'm about to reveal affects every single traffic stop in America, especially if you're caring. Hit that button right now, because this is information the mainstream media is barely covering. All right, let's talk about what just happened. On May 15, 2025, the United States Supreme Court issued a unanimous 9-0 decision in a case called Barnes versus Felix. When I say unanimous, I mean every single justice agreed. Conservative justices, liberal justices, everyone. That almost never happens. And when it does, you need to pay attention, because it means something fundamental just changed in American law. Here's what this case is really about. It's about the Fourth Amendment, which protects you from unreasonable searches and seizures by the government. And yes, when a cop shoots you, that's legally considered a seizure under the Fourth Amendment. The question in this case was simple, but absolutely critical. When a court decides whether a police shooting was legal or illegal, what are they allowed to look at? Can they only look at the split second when the trigger was pulled? Or can they look at everything that happened before that moment? For years, 4 federal circuit courts, including the Fifth Circuit covering Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, used something called the moment of threat rule. This rule said that judges could only look at the precise instant when the officer felt threatened. Everything that happened before that moment was off limits. The officer's actions leading up to the shooting doesn't matter. Whether the officer created the danger himself doesn't matter. Only the final 2 seconds count. Let me tell you why that's insane, and I'll use the actual facts from this case. On April 28, 2016, a man named Ashian Barnes was driving on a highway outside Houston, Texas. A constable named Roberto Felix got a radio alert about outstanding toll violations linked to Barnes' license plate. Felix pulled him over. Pretty routine stuff, right? Felix walked up to the car, asked for license and insurance. Barnes said he didn't have his license on him, and the car was a rental in his girlfriend's name. Barnes was looking around for paperwork, and Felix told him to stop digging around. Felix said he smelled marijuana. Then Barnes said maybe his ID was in the trunk. Felix told him to pop the trunk from inside the car. Barnes did, and he also turned the ignition back on. Now here's where it gets critical. Felix opened the driver's door and pulled his gun. Barnes started driving away, and this is the key part. Felix jumped onto the doors of the moving car. He's literally hanging on the outside of a moving vehicle. He yelled twice, "Don't _ move." Then with his head above the roof so he couldn't even see inside the car, he fired 2 shots into the vehicle. Barnes was hit and died, but he managed to stop the car first. The whole thing from the car moving to it stopping 5 seconds. The time from Felix jumping on the car to firing the first shot, 2 seconds. Barnes's mother sued Felix under federal civil rights law, saying he used excessive force and violated her son's Fourth Amendment rights. And here's what happened in the lower courts. Both the District Court and in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said they could only look at those final 2 seconds when Felix was hanging on the moving car. They said at that moment a reasonable officer would fear for his life, so the shooting was justified. Everything before that, including Felix's decision to jump on a moving car, was legally irrelevant under the moment of threat rule. Think about how crazy that is. The officer created the dangerous situation by jumping on the car, but under the old rule, the court couldn't even consider that fact. It's like if I picked a fight with you, you defended yourself, and then I shot you and claimed self-defense. But the jury wasn't allowed to hear that I started the fight. That's essentially what the moment of threat rule allowed. Now, quick legal note. This is educational information, not legal advice. Always consult an attorney for your specific situation. But what I am giving you here is what every gun owner and every American needs to understand about their rights. So Barnes's mother appealed to the Supreme Court, and here's what the court said unanimously. Justice Kagan wrote the opinion, and she made it crystal clear. The Fourth Amendment requires courts to look at the totality of the circumstances, not just one moment, not just 2 seconds, everything relevant that happened during the encounter. The court said, and I'm quoting here, A court deciding a use of force case cannot review the totality of the circumstances if it is put on chronological blinders. The court pointed to another case called Plumboff versus Rickard to explain this. In that case, a driver led police on a dangerous 5-minute car chase at over 100 miles per hour. When officers finally shot him, someone argued the shooting was unjustified because the chase was over at that moment. But the Supreme Court said no, you have to look at everything. The 5 minutes of reckless driving, the danger to the public, all of it matters to understand whether the shooting was reasonable at the final moment. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what you'll learn in my next video, where I break down the exact words to say when police ask if you are carrying a gun. These aren't just random phrases, they're legally tested responses that protect your rights without escalating the situation. Subscribe so you don't miss it, because that video could save you from a felony charge or worse. Here's why this Barnes versus Felix decision matters so much, especially if you're a gun owner. Every time you get pulled over while carrying, you're in a Fourth Amendment encounter. If something goes wrong, if an officer uses force against you, this ruling determines how the incident gets judged. Under the old moment of threat rule in some circuits, an officer could do all kinds of unreasonable things leading up to using force. But as long as he felt threatened at the final instant, he was protected. Not anymore. Now courts must look at whether the officer's own actions created the danger. Did the officer give commands that made the situation more dangerous? Did the officer fail to use de-escalation techniques? Did the officer put himself in a position where he'd have no choice but to use deadly force? All of that is now fair game in court. Let me give you a hypothetical example to make this clear. Let's say you're legally carrying concealed. You get pulled over, and you properly notify the officer. You have a permit and a firearm. The officer tells you to reach for your wallet. As you reach, the officer suddenly yells, "Gun," and shoots you. Under the old moment of threat rule in those 4 circuits, a court might only look at the split second when your hand moved toward where the gun was. At that moment, was the officer in fear? Yes, shooting justified. But under the new standard, after Barnes versus Felix, the court must look at the whole thing. Did the officer create the danger by ordering you to reach near your gun? Did the officer fail to first secure the weapon, or have you step out of the vehicle? Was the stop even lawful to begin with? All of these earlier circumstances now matter in judging whether the force was reasonable. That's huge. The decision also has something interesting in Justice Kavanaugh's concurring opinion. He was joined by Justices Thomas, Allo, and Barrett, and he spent 6 pages talking about how dangerous traffic stops are for police officers. He's absolutely right about that. Officers get killed during traffic stops. It's one of the most dangerous things they do. But here's what's important. Even after acknowledging all that danger, even after explaining how difficult these split-second decisions are, Justice Kavanaugh still joined the unanimous opinion, saying courts must look at everything, not just the final moment. That tells you something. This isn't about being anti-police or pro-police. This is about the Constitution. The Fourth Amendment doesn't say the government can seize you, which includes shooting you as long as an officer feels scared at the final second. It says seizures must be reasonable, and you can't judge reasonableness by putting blinders on and ignoring everything that led to that moment. Hey, 73% of people watching right now aren't subscribed. Don't be part of that group. Join the 50,000 gun owners who get these critical legal updates first. Click subscribe because the legal landscape is changing fast and you need to stay informed. This isn't just YouTube content. This is your constitutional rights we're talking about. Now, let's talk about what this means going forward. The Supreme Court sent the Barnes case back to the lower courts and told them to reevaluate the shooting using the full timeline, not just the final 2 seconds. We don't know yet what will happen to Officer Felix. The court didn't say the shooting was definitely unreasonable. They just said the lower courts used the wrong test. So the case will be analyzed again, this time looking at everything, including whether Felix should have jumped on that moving car in the first place. But the bigger impact is on every future case. Police departments across the country are going to have to retrain officers. Prosecutors reviewing police shootings will have to consider the full encounter, and defense attorneys representing people shot by police now have a unanimous Supreme Court decision, saying the totality of circumstances matters. This levels the playing field in a way it hasn't been in years. Here's something else nobody's talking about. The Supreme Court specifically did not address one issue in this case, and it's a big one. They didn't decide whether an officer loses the right to use force if he created the danger in the first place. They left that question for another day. Justice Kagan wrote that issue was properly before them because the lower courts never addressed it due to their narrow time focus. So that question is still out there. Can an officer intentionally or recklessly create a dangerous situation and then use deadly force to get out of it? We don't have a clear answer yet, but the fact that the court mentioned it means it's on their radar. For gun owners, this is especially relevant. Imagine an officer sees you have a holstered gun during a traffic stop. He gets nervous and makes erratic commands. Put your hands up. No, wait. Show me your license. No, hands on the wheel. Now, reach for your ID. You're trying to comply, but the commands are contradictory and confusing. If that officer then shoots you because he interprets your confused movements as threatening, should he be protected? Under the Barnes ruling, courts now must look at whether his own contradictory commands created the confusion that led to the shooting. That's progress, but here's what you need to understand. This ruling doesn't mean officers can't use force. It doesn't mean every police shooting is now going to be found unconstitutional. What it means is that courts have to be honest about the full picture. If an officer acts reasonably throughout the encounter and is forced to use deadly force because of an actual threat he didn't create, this ruling doesn't change that outcome. Reasonable force is still allowed. The Fourth Amendment has always said that what this ruling stops is officers hiding behind a technicality. They can't act unreasonably for 2 minutes and then claim the final 2 seconds justify everything. Context matters. Your rights don't disappear because a court agrees to ignore half the evidence. This information could literally change everything about how police encounters are judged going forward. Subscribe now because my next video breaks down exactly what to do step by step. When you're carrying and you get pulled over, the wrong words can get you killed. The right words can save your life. I'll show you exactly what to say. Don't miss it. Let me bring this home with the bottom line. The Barnes versus Felix decision reaffirms that the Fourth Amendment means something real. When the government seizes you, whether through arrest or through deadly force, that seizure must be objectively reasonable based on the totality of the circumstances. Not a cherry-picked moment, not a convenient two-conned window, everything. This matters for gun owners because we're often the ones in these encounters. We are the ones who get pulled over and have to navigate the complicated and sometimes terrifying process of informing officers. We're armed. We're the ones who need courts to look at the full picture if something goes wrong. Did we act lawfully? Did the officer act reasonably? Or did someone's poor decisions create an unnecessary tragedy? Those questions can only be answered by looking at everything. The Supreme Court got this one right, 9-0 unanimous. And that should tell you this isn't a political decision. This is a constitutional decision. Your Fourth Amendment rights just got stronger, not because courts will side against police in every case, but because courts will finally have to look at all the facts before making a decision. If you learned something today, here's what I need you to do. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. These legal changes happen fast, and most gun owners don't find out until it's too late. The next video in this series covers the 5 words that can protect you when an officer asks about your gun. It's based on actual case law, and it works, but you'll only see it if you're subscribed. And one more thing, share this video with every gun owner you know. Share it with your family, your friends, your shooting buddies. Constitutional rights only matter if people know about them. The Barnes versus Felix decision is barely getting covered by mainstream media, but it affects millions of Americans every single day. Get the word out. Remember, this is educational content about your constitutional rights. It's not legal advice for your specific situation. If you're involved in a police encounter or a legal case, get a qualified attorney in your jurisdiction. But knowing your rights before you need them, that's not optional. That's essential. The Supreme Court just reminded the government that the Constitution still applies even in those final split seconds of a police encounter. 9 justices, 0 disagreement, and a major win for the Fourth Amendment. Now you know what happened and why it matters. Stay informed, stay safe, and stay constitutional.